It's almost time to start my lecture. First of all, please confirm if there are some technical issues. Can you hear me well? Can you see me well? Yeah, now I see that everything is working. So we're going to start immediately. Okay. Now my today's topic are the French endgames. Actually, this is a very complicated topic. There are many types of endgame that might arise in the French defense. Quite obviously, it will be difficult to cover everything in 90 minutes. Therefore, I have decided to focus on the most characteristic endgames for the French defense. For example, we will mainly look at endgames featuring the pawn structure that you see on the board. Of course, sometimes in most of the cases, the C pawns will be exchanged, but we will mainly focus on positions with closed center where white has a space advantage. Why I have made such a choice? Okay, first of all, you can see this type of structure in many openings. For example, after this lecture, you will get a better understanding of the Cabo-Can endgames. Also, such pawn structures can be seen in various openings, like Sicilian defense, especially the systems with bishop b5, Slav defense, London system, and so on and so on. That's why the French type of center is universal type of center. The knowledge of these structures will increase your general chess understanding. And of course, there are different type of structures that might arise, and also quite different endgames. For example, in many variations, you can get such a structure: e takes d5, queen d5, let's say d c5, bishop c5. I will not cover endgames in this pawn structure because tomorrow Grandmaster Papaioannou will cover everything related to this pawn structure. Another typical pawn structure is the so-called French Isolani. E takes d5, e takes d5, and white exchanges on c5. Then we get an isolated pawn. This structure was discussed yesterday by the Grandmaster Peter Arnaudov. So today we will mainly focus on the endgames arising in this closed center. So generally speaking, Black is doing well in the endgame because of the nature of the pawn structure. So as a basic knowledge, we know that when the side that has a space advantage avoids exchanging pieces. And in the middle game, the space advantage is a really very important factor. With the queens being exchanged, however, and after other exchanges, the space advantage is not so relevant factor. And as we're going to see, in many cases, this space advantage can backfire because very often white turns out to be overextended, and it's not so easy to protect the further advanced pawns. Therefore, if Black doesn't have other statical problems, as we're going to see very often, this bishop can be a statical problem. But let's suppose that Black doesn't have static problems. Then usually in the end game, he is doing fine. Okay, so now we are going to discuss different endgame ideas. First of all, I will show the most important and typical endgame ideas for Black. just because we need to know what we're looking for when we play the French defense. But of course, after that, we will see White's most dangerous ideas, just to know what type of positions to avoid when playing with Black, and if there are players who want to play French defense with White, you will know what White is aiming for in the French endgames. The first important topic that I'm going to cover now is the break f7, f6. Let's suppose that these pawns have been exchanged. C takes d4, C takes d4. What is Black's source of counterplay in this position? Of course, you know that we can put pressure on d4, knight c6, queen b6, and so on and so forth. But this pressure is hardly enough, because White usually manages to safeguard the d4 pawn. And in my opinion, in this type of structures, the most powerful resource is the break f6. And here I wanted to share with you one very important middle game concept that was first discovered by the Moldavian trainer Chebanenko. He was the coach of my trainer Gavrikov. And he makes the following important observation. You know that Nimzovich says that the pawn chain should be attacked by the base. So, for example, in here, according to Nimzovich, we should mainly focus on attacking the d4 pawn. But Chebanenko goes further. So he says that when the pawn chain contains only two pawns, you see d4 and t5, then we should attack the top of the pawn chain by means of, for example, f6. I'm not speaking about this position. This is just an example, guys. Just an overview. I don't speak about this concrete position. Now I wanted to introduce a general concept. And what is the logic behind such an approach? If we exchange these pawns, you see that the d4 pawn will get isolated. And White has no space advantage whatsoever. We will take a look at such structures. But if White doesn't take on f6 and we take on e5, let's suppose we have such a structure, then Black immediately gets a strong passed pawn on d5. That's why when our opponent has a pawn chain that contains only two pawns, a very important idea is to attack the head of the pawn chain and not the base. Okay, sometimes attacking the base works well, but here this is just an additional knowledge. Okay, first of all, I wanted to show one very interesting game by Mikhail Gurevich. He is playing with Black, and let's take a look at this endgame. So actually, yeah, this endgame. How Black should proceed in this position, and how you are going to evaluate this position. What is the correct evaluation, and how should Black proceed here? What do you think, guys? You see, White has space advantage, better bishop. He will play rook c1. What is the correct evaluation? Okay, yeah, so I see that the majority of you tends to prefer White because of the space advantage and the better bishop. Of course, Black has this problematic d7 bishop. In reality, however, I think that the position is equal. Black doesn't have a single problem in this position, and I would even take black because white's center turns out to be overextended. What is the correct plan? First of all, we should try to prepare the advance f7, f6 by means of knight e7. I will now tell you black's typical plan in such positions. Okay, we want to play f6 and somehow to provoke e takes f6 when after g takes f6 we are going to have majority in the center and also the possibility to activate our rook via the g file. Okay, white is not going to capture on f6 immediately, therefore we should put pressure on e5 in the perfect case by playing knight c6. And in this way, we will provoke e takes f6. But white has always a decent counterplay along the c file. In order to neutralize white's counterplay on the c file, what we should do, what is our typical weapon to neutralize counterplay? Exchange one pair of rooks. If one pair of rooks are exchanged and our king is on d8, there will be no counterplay on the c file. And then white can proceed with his king side ideas. You see that his pawn, white's pawn chain contains two pawns. That's why attacking by the head is the best possible decision. Okay, let's take a look how Gurevich gradually outplayed his opponent. So rook c1, f6, rook c5, king d8, important move. The king is perfectly placed here. Now the connection between the rooks is not a problem for me because I'm going to exchange one pair of rooks. You see rook to c8, rook c1, and okay, immediately we exchange one pair of rooks. So in this position, should I play knight c6 immediately with the idea of f takes e5? In general, this is a possible idea, but you should always recon with bishop b5, and white wants to obtain this pawn structure. For example, you take, he takes, and then you get a typical French endgame with a good knight versus bad bishop. So this position is strategically very difficult. So just a second, I have a question. If the knight were not on f3, we would still want to attack the chain with f6, or no, because f4 is possible? This is a very good question, and we will see similar situations later. Okay, keep in mind your question. We will see similar situations later. So here, the immediate knight c6 is not a good idea, and therefore Gurevich makes another typical French move in such structures, bishop e8. So very often in this pawn structure, we activate our white squared bishop via e8. After that, it's possible to exchange the bishops via g6, or even to play bishop h5 to chase the knight away, thus weakening the d4 square. Knight e1 was played. Now knight c6. In this position, knight c6 comes with a tempo, and in this position, white was forced to take on f6. Okay, g takes f6. When you manage to achieve this pawn structure, you're already slightly better. So what is our plan in this pawn structure? This is very typical after king e3. First of all, if possible, we should prepare the advance e5. For example, king e7, king d6, and e5. That's why Gurevich is doing this idea. So f4, king d6. But you see that now getting e5 is not optimal. It's possible because the d5 pawn can be a dangerous passer. But in this position, before going for e5, you can make use of the so-called minority attack. Remember that in this pawn structure, there is a typical minority attack. For example, rook g8. Somehow you can try to provoke g3, and you have this idea h5, h4. If your opponent does not play g3, you can play h4, h5, h4 in any way just to fix the g2 pawn. And of course, under suitable circumstances, you will play e5 anyway. In the game, White didn't manage to put enough resistance, so he immediately took the pawn, and after rook h8, bishop c2, rook takes h2, Black was considerably better. So in this endgame, basically Black is winning because the bishop will go to e4, the rook is very active under the best possible circumstances. This e5 move will come. The position is hopeless for White since the bishop is dominating the knight. But let me repeat the most important takeaway of this endgame. So here, what is the right idea? This move knight e7 is very important because now when there are only two pawns in the pawn chain, attacking on d4 is not that powerful strategy. We should rather focus on attacking the head of the pawn chain. And in order to do that, we don't need the knight on f5. That's why we reroute the knight to either c6 or g6. And our idea is based on the break f6. How we neutralize the counterplay along the c file, who will tell in 5 seconds, because this is very obvious. What if White starts building his counterplay on the c file? Of course, you exchange one pair of rooks. And where should the king go? To d8, just controlling the c7 square. There is no possible penetration. Okay. Is everything clear, guys? Because this was a very important game, conceptually speaking. Great. Now we continue with another interesting game, which was played by Lenderman with Black against Aman Hambleton. Okay, this was a game played in Chess.com, but rapid time control, I think, but in either case, it's very instructive. Why French endgames are important? Even if you're not a French player, you will benefit a lot from this lecture, because you see that in this game, actually, we have London move order. You see a typical London position. I fast forward the opening. It's not that important, but here you play, you get this endgame with this typical French structure. Very often in London, as we're going to see in other games as well, you can get French pawn structure. And here, okay, bishop a6, exchanging the bet bishop. It's here. It's not so important. Okay, this is the first critical position for the game. Actually, the position is equal according to the computer, but only Black can play for a win. Only Black can play for a win because White is overextended. Can you find the best move in 10 seconds? Yeah, so in the long run, we are going to prepare f7, f6, right? Of course. But first of all, we should exchange one pair of rooks along the c file, because White has dangerous counterplay along the c file. And where should I put the king in this position? After exchanging one pair of rooks, where to put the king? Just to make sure that that my opponent has no play whatsoever. Okay, you say d8 as it was in the previous game, but in this position, d7 is perfectly acceptable because our remaining rook will need the 8th rank. So rook fc8. The idea is to exchange one pair of rooks, and I prepare the maneuver king f8, king e8, king d7. So rook c1, rook takes c6, rook takes c6, king f8. You see, it's very simple. Now, before playing f6, what should I do? How should I improve my pieces in order to prepare the advance f7, f6? I see that the pawn chain contains only 2 pawns, and I should attack the head of the pawn chain. Yeah, this knight on a6 is doing nothing at the moment. That's why, first of all, I'm going to bring the knight to c6, and then f6 will be very powerful. So knight b8, h4. I'm not sure about this move because after f6, let's suppose e takes f6, g takes f6, black will be playing rook g8, and in the future the g4 square might become vulnerable. So it's not so easy for white to make useful waiting moves, as you can see. Knight c6, king d3, and here, of course, f6. Here he played g3. Okay, what is the drawback of this move? He is not in a hurry to take on f6, and by playing g3, he wants to make sure that this is protected. For example, in this structure, we don't have this tempo attacking on g2. But actually, this move weakens the f file, and now the f3 knight is getting vulnerable. That's why in this position, Lenderman played immediately rook f8. Now you see that this knight is tied to the defense of the other one, because f takes e5 becomes an option to consider in every position. So he played e takes f6. How should I take? With the pawn or with the bishop? What was the perfect structure? Of course, with the pawn, and you see that this time white is even not ready to play f4, and that's why black is going to follow with e5, then e4, then f5, f4. Very clean example, actually. Knight g1, e5, knight e2, bishop d6. So black is preparing the advance e4. That's why he immediately takes control of the f4 square. Knight b1, e4, king e3. Now he wants to play knight f4. This is not a problem for us, maybe not immediately because the d4 pawn is hanging, but you see knight e7 is very powerful now, because knight f5 will come in case of knight f4. Knight c3, bishop b8, just making sure that everything is protected. And here f5. Only black is playing in this position. So black's kingside play is going in a very straightforward way. On the other hand, does white have any counterplay on the queen side? No. We exchanged one pair of rooks and we put our king in the center on d7. That's why there is no play on the queen side. And white should just passively wait in this position. He played rook c1, f4, g takes f4, bishop f4, knight f4, rook f4, and black is already winning a pawn. You see how smoothly black managed to win against a grandmaster, and what is even better is that you were guessing all the key moves for black in seconds, because you know that the basic concepts. For example, if someone tells you that in this endgame only black can be better, You will say, okay, it's crazy. White has more space, control of the C file. The A6 knight is not playing. How can black be better in this endgame? But when you have deeper understanding of the French endgames, you know exactly which factors are more important, and now it's perfectly understandable that only black can play for a win here. Okay, so very important concept is to have in mind this f6 advance. Now we will take a look at some examples featuring black's queenside play. So how black is using his pawns on the queenside in order to create counterplay. Okay, now we will start with the game Grigor Grigorov. In this game, we will see that after multiple exchanges, White's position is getting overextended. So you can see that how vulnerable can the white center be in after many exchanges. Okay, we can actually briefly discuss the opening, but it's not so important. Bishop d7 was played by Grigorov, with white is playing Grigor. cd4, cd4, bishop b5. Theoretically speaking, the game is not so relevant. Yeah, actually, I want to start here. Yeah, in this position, what is the move that you are going to play as black? Now, attacking the base doesn't work so well. Obviously, e takes f6. It's impossible to take with the pawn. Okay, I see rook c6, queen b4. Yeah, the best move is, I think, queen b4, because structurally speaking, the endgame is very good for us. We doesn't have our white squared bishop. That might be a weakness. That's why exchanging the queens works very well for black. And if, for example, he takes a takes b4 is perfect, because this a2 pawn will be vulnerable. That's why he plays rook c3, and we get another typical structure: rook c3, b takes c3. If he takes with the knight, you see that there is no kingside play now. White can never organize an attack on the king side, and after rook c8 you get this typical French perfect French scenario. The game is being played only on the queen side, and black has very clear ideas. Knight b6, knight c4 is coming, the b2 pawn is vulnerable. If this pawn moves, the c3 knight is going to be vulnerable, and white doesn't have attacking chances. Also, knight f5 might come. Therefore, white should always reckon with the vulnerability of the d4 pawn. That's why he took with this pawn, b takes c3, queen c4, rook b1. And in general, when your opponent has this structure, believe me, it's very difficult to put enough pressure on c3, because the c3 pawn is in white's camp. White can easily protect this pawn. Therefore, usually the best plan is to prepare b7, b4, and in this way, after exchanging the c3 pawn, you go to the normal French structure. So b5 was played by Grigorov, g3. You see another typical idea: knight h4, knight g2, and then this knight actually can go to e3, probably to g4. Well, Grigor is already thinking about some kingside attack, but it's not realistic, because it's even unclear how he is going to bring the queen to the kingside. here comes a very typical idea to remember. So black should prepare the advance b4, and the best way to do so is knight b8, followed by knight c6 and b4. The other knights will be needed for the purposes of the defense. In case of necessity, the knight can go to f5, and in this way, the king side will be protected. So knight h4, knight c6, knight g2, b4 in this position, knight e3, queen a6, king g2. Normal moves, nothing to comment here. Rook b8, black is preparing his queenside play. In the suitable moment, he is going to exchange b takes c3. So Grishuk is trying to activate his passive pieces, knight g1, knight f3. Probably it was time to think about the defense. For example, a nice possibility would have been c takes b4, a takes b4, knight c1 with the idea of putting the knight to b3. But if he plays in this way, it becomes clear that white is already fighting for equality. So knight g1, rook b7. The idea is b takes c3, and white cannot take with a check. Rook b2. And here, how you are going to react? Okay, you have 30 seconds to consider, because it's a very straightforward way. I just want to illustrate one very typical scenario in French defense. Yeah, so if possible, you can write the entire sequence, at least 2-3 moves, just to be sure that you get the points. Okay, Andrei. So actually, the answer is not that sophisticated. Let's take a look at the game. B takes c3. Now we exchange the rooks and play queen d3. And you see that all these pawns, d4, e5, h5, that are very, very dangerous in the middle game, are now a huge problem for white. You see, after some piece exchanges, how overextended white's position tends to be. And it's already very difficult to play with white, because after knight e2, black keeps exchanging pieces. Knight f5, knight takes f5, queen f5, and it's already not easy to protect everything. It's not easy to keep the position together, because black wants queen takes h5, queen e4 is coming, the d4 pawn is vulnerable. And you see the typical scenario in which white's space advantage backfires, because since the pawns are further advanced, there are many weak squares behind the pawns, and also these pawns are getting vulnerable. It's not so easy to defend them. For example, I want queen e4. If you play f3, then queen d3 will be possible. So black can use this entire space in order to penetrate in the opponent's camp. How the game went: queen c3, queen e4. Now, okay, he should protect the knight. Now the knight is coming, knight d3, and even in the end game, black is attacking. So queen d2, Grishuk is making only moves to survive. Queen f5, the threat is checkmate in 1. You mean queen b6? In which moment queen b6? I don't understand. When queen b6, Eric? Instead of queen c3, just a second. Queen f5. Yeah, so now queen b6. Okay, this is of course a possibility. Maybe queen e4 again, and if king f1, then probably again knight b4. The knight joins the attack. Okay, it's not so easy to calculate everything, but it's clear that white is under big pressure. Yeah, in this position, queen f5, knight g1, queen e4, knight e2, a4, fixing the a3 pawn. After some fight, Gurevich managed to convert his advantage, but we have already seen how dangerous are all these exchanges for white, because at the end of the day he finds himself very overextended, and all these central pawns that were so important in the middle game now become very good targets. Okay, I hope that everything is clear now. There are no questions related to this game. And here we're going to see another typical idea for black, which is the okay, not only for black but also for whites, because the C file, the open C file, is a very important factor in all the French structures. Therefore, the control of the C file gives a lot of opportunities. First of all, let's take a look at one game played by Thomas Wutter, a guy to follow when it comes to French defense. He's playing with black. He manages to use the C file in an excellent way. So once again, we see that this is not a French defense, but we get a French type of structure via London. So bishop takes f4. I fast forward the opening, just wanted to demonstrate that out of many openings you can get this French type of structure. You see we have a French structure, and here what is black's best move? Can you find it in 10 seconds? I think that even 10 seconds are very much. Yeah, so far I have seen only one correct answer by Nicholas. Okay, already more correct answers are coming. So now the right move is queen c7, and we get a very typical French position. What is the idea behind the move queen c7? We want to take the control of the c file, and in this way we also prevent white from playing rook c1. But conceptually speaking, this position is very important, because similar positions can arise out of many openings and out of many pawn structures. There is, guys, there is one principle that is not so famous and not so well discussed in the chess literature, but nevertheless, it's very important. So the principle says the following: when there is only one open file in the position, and this file is under our control, the attack of our opponent on the king side will never be successful. In general, all the variations will work in our favor, because we control the only open file. This principle was formulated by Nimzovich in his book My System, but is well forgotten now. You see that conceptually, due to the e5 pawn, white should be trying to attack on the king side. For example, with moves like knight f3, bringing the queen to the king side, putting the h pawn into motion. But this attack will never ever be successful because there is only one open file, and this file is controlled by black. What should black be playing for in this position? If possible, black should try to exchange the queens and also the knights, because if we exchange the queens, the white knight will become the only active piece. If only rooks remain on the board, black will be considerably better because white doesn't have any way to activate his rooks. Going a bit further, I will say that almost all endgames with major pieces are good for black in French structures. And I will, if the time allows, I will provide even more examples featuring this idea. But for the moment, I have explained enough conceptually speaking. Let's take a look at this game of Thomas Wooter. So knight f3, immediately we try to exchange the queens. Queen a3, we start tripling our major pieces along the c file. h3, okay, h6 is always good. Rook d2, queen f5, rook d1, and here knight c6. Okay, does black give the c file with this move? No, he calculated this move. We do not allow rook c1 because there is a simple tactic. Who will tell it? Yeah, knight e5 or knight takes d4. So actually this rook c1 doesn't work. We do not give the control of the c file. So queen e3, and here there is one very nice move that you should know in such French structures. Okay, we control the c file, but only controlling it is not sufficient. You need squares for penetration. And very often in this type of symmetrical structure, you try to provoke the advance b3, and in this way you get access to this important c3 square. How should I provoke b3? Of course, knight a5, b3, and now you see that the knight goes back to b4, but already the c3 square is available. By the way, you always calculate this move, rook c1, but it never works because you have knight d4, you have knight e5, knight e1, knight b4, queen e2, rook c3. You see that we immediately manage to make use of the c3 square. So a3 was played. What is the best move in your opinion? Knight c6 in this position or knight c2? Where to put the knight? Knight c2, because we are interested in exchanging the knights. We know that all the endgames with major pieces work very well for us. So you see, take, queen d3, we exchange queens, and this endgame is practically very, very difficult for white. I would say that it's lost. But in rook endgames, of course, one should never underestimate the drawing tendencies. Nevertheless, practically speaking, playing this endgame with white is very difficult. So now black is going to double his rooks along the second rank. Rook f3, a6, g4, rook d2. Now if the rooks are exchanged, the d4 pawn is dropping, and actually white's counterplay is not enough because whenever he plays rook c6, we have rook b4. Okay, rook c1, rook c2. We don't give him any counterplay. Take, rook d3. And here, what is the best way to improve the position? Who will tell? How should we improve our position? Bringing the king or not? In general, in endgame, we always try to gain space and to fix weaknesses. That's why would have played b5, 8x, b5, 8x, b5, king f1, b4, fixing the b3 pawn. And after king e1, rook b2. Now, eternally, our rook will be more active than the rook of our opponent. And after that, black will try to activate his king. In rook endgames, first of all, you try to activate your rook, and then you activate the king. How we are going to proceed? Okay, we see this typical structure with two pawns. That's why we prepare the advanced f6, king f8, king e7, and then f6. So rook f3, king f8, king d1, king e7, king e1, f6, typical chess, g takes f6, rook e3, now king f7. Almost Zugzwang for white, because he cannot play with the king. After king f1, rook d2. After king d1, rook takes f2. If the rook leaves the e file, then e5 might come. So he played f4, but now our rook is even more active, and he played h5. Then he collected the h5 pawn. Yeah, and converted the advantage. Okay, the game, just let me finish the game, and I will answer the question. Yeah, I don't know why. At some point, this king just entered the game via f5, but here there was a problem with the notation, not so important. So now there is a question: if you're going to recapture on f6 with the pawn anyway, why not save a tempo by playing it first and then king f7? Of course, it's possible. It's possible here. These are just details. It's important to understand the position conceptually. The move order chosen by the player can always be mistaken. So, is everything clear until now? Because now we will focus on another very important concept in French endgames. If you guys, you have questions until now, and if not everything is clear, please ask now, because now we will see something very interesting. Yes, so I can, how can black make progress? Very simple, actually. The rook can go to c6, protecting the e6 pawn, and all the time he's ready to play to go to c3, and then you play king g6, king f5 when white's position is collapsing. Is now more clear? Is it good to exchange one pair of rooks when only rooks are on the board? Very often, yes, just to eliminate the opponent's counterplay. But you know that in chess there are no 100% valid rules, because if this was the case, chess wouldn't have been so popular. Okay, now I want to speak about the positions in which black might execute the white square strategy. This is one of my favorite topics. I like to apply the white square strategy in French positions. And when in French type of structures, we can apply this white square strategy. When we exchange our dark squared bishop for one of the opponent's knights, we immediately get better control of the white squares. So in these cases, the white square strategy, playing on the white squares, becomes very powerful. Okay, I don't want to speak theoretically. That's why I want to give a concrete example now. This is a game by Ivkov. Ivkov is playing with black. And let's start here. Now, okay. Now black plays bishop takes a3, b takes a3, and you see the dark squared bishop has been exchanged for a knight. Also, the white squared bishops are exchanged, and then we are going to apply the so-called white square strategy. Why we should be playing on the white squares? Because we can control the white squares with our minor pieces. Both knights can control white squares, and only this knight of the opponent can control white squares. That's why in the perfect case, we are going to exchange one pair of knights as well, and we will leave the opponent with this bishop that cannot control the white squares. That's why we will follow with our white square strategy. Does white have advantage on the dark squares? Not at all, because our knights can control dark squares as well. Let's take a look at the game. Now you see a bit irregular pawn structure, but it will become pretty normal French structure in a while. Knight e4 was played here. Don't pay so much attention to these moves because actually we start here. King d7, king f1. Should I play rook c8 and try to exchange the rooks? What do you think? Not at all. You should keep at least one pair of rooks, because ideally you are going to create some weaknesses, and if you don't have major pieces, you cannot attack the opponent weaknesses. So when you have domination of the white squares, a typical construction in the French defense is h5 followed by knight f5. First of all, you play h5, you secure the f5 square for the knights, and okay, then knight f5. The game continued in this way: king e2, knight f5, knight f3. Now, what is the best plan in this structure? You already know it. Who will tell me? Yeah, f6, of course. The pawn chain consists of 2 pawns only. And what is the typical way of preparing f6 in these endgames? Wow, guys, you are very, very strong French players. I think that most of you will start playing French after the camp, or most of you are already playing it. So knight b8, knight c6, and then f6. Okay, this was played in the game. And you see that now knight e1, f6, and here Ivkov, not Ivkov, his opponent played f4. I have already said that we will get back to this move f4 and how to react against it. This is a very typical structure. Actually, if he takes on f6, we know how to proceed. So we play g takes f6, and now we want to play e5 to build a strong center. And you can imagine this move, for example, f4, with the bishop being on e3. Now it's quite possible just to play rook g8 followed by h4, fixing the g2 pawn, and white is completely tight. So f4 was played. Here, generally speaking, when you have this pawn constellation, your idea is to play g5 without taking on e5. This is a very important position. You can see this idea in Cabo-Can as well, in French defense. You just try to ruin white's structure. And now, okay, the idea is g takes f4, then this pawn might drop. The rook can enter the game via the g file. And very often, if he takes on f6, you can even consider playing g4 because this pawn will be lost in any case. And what is the usual winning strategy? Let's suppose that I have managed to take this pawn. What is the usual winning strategy in this position? You try to achieve this type of structure with a pawn on h3. And of course, in all the end games, this pawn will be vulnerable and white must recon with some sacrifices. Is it possible to win the game only by using one weakness? Not at all. You will try to provoke more weaknesses on the queen side. For example, rook f8, knight a5, you try to provoke b4. This knight might come to e4. For white, it will be impossible to defend on two wings in this endgame. Let's take a look at the game. He didn't play g5 immediately. He played rook c8 first, rook b1. What was the threat? The threat was knight, not knight e5 immediately because this rook is protected, but we have knight e3, king e3. Let's say this move is played. We have this idea. And after rook c8, this intermediate check, and then we collect the rook. So Ivkov just creates an opposition along the c file. So rook b1, and here we control the c file. We are even more active, and you see this typical advance g5. And what is the best reaction to g3? Structurally speaking, what is the best move? Yeah, only correct answers. Of course, g4. You see complete domination on the white squares. And in this structure, this e3 bishop is pretty useless. White cannot use this bishop in any way, and all the play is going on the white squares. Our next idea will be to play h4 and possibly h3. Okay, if you can win by playing h takes g3, you do it. You calculate, of course, but generally h4, h3. Let's take a look. Knight g2, rook f8, rook b2. How to prepare h4? This knight will go to g6 now. So knight e7, bishop d2, knight g6, rook c2. Are we afraid of this rook along the c file? Not at all. This guy is watching. Now f takes e5. I'm not. Actually, when you take on e5, you should calculate precisely. You must be sure that this move f takes e5 doesn't work well. Now we have our rook on the f file, and I think that actually we managed to penetrate. For example, f takes e5, h4 seems very strong here. For white, it's not possible to keep the king side together because rook f3 will come. He took with the d pawn. Now you have a passed pawn as well. h4, bishop e1. Okay, here h3 is possible. For example, I'm sure that this position is close to winning for black. but it's not so easy to break through. But Ivkov calculated that h takes g3 is working well, because if h takes g3, then rook h8. And after rook h3, it's not so easy to defend the g3 pawn. Generally speaking, when you have this tension provoked by the move h4, you should calculate. H takes g3 is an option that always comes into consideration, but also h3. You know this typical tendency of pushing the pawn all the way to h3 and just get a long-term asset in the end game. So he took on g3, rook h8, knight e3. Should I exchange one pair of knights? Always. And then where to put this knight? f5, of course. Knight e7, knight f5. And now, what should I do? I have strengthened the kingside position to the maximum, but can I win only on the kingside? Now I should try to create another weakness on the queen side. That's why I play a5, a4. So here Ivkov applies the so-called principle of two weaknesses. Now king g2. Here he played rook a8, but even more precise would have been a4, just to provoke b4. And since we have this weakness on a3, it's possible to exchange the rooks, and I believe that this position is winning, because the king is going all the way to c4. So since we have other games to consider, we will not discuss further details related to this position, but in the PGM file you will take a look at the entire game. Now I want to focus on another very important aspect in French positions. You know that sometimes the French bishop, the white squared bishop, is getting very problematic, and in the end game this bishop is even more problematic. And here I wanted to show some examples in which white managed to use this passive French bishop. And one of the stamp games is Petr Leko against Mikhail Gurevich. So this time Leko is playing with white, and I wanted to show the game from white's perspective. Let's take a look at this endgame. Typical French endgame, the b7 bishop is passive, and there is one other important factor that I will discuss in a while. First of all, let me ask you, what is the best continuation for whites? How you are going to play this position with whites? Yeah, interestingly enough, everyone is suggesting bishop e4. That is actually a pretty decent option. But actually this move, bishop e4, has some disadvantages as well, because now the knight is not so stable. Black can put pressure on the knight, and also the b4 pawn fixes our c2 pawn. That's why rook c8, bishop d5. Black has some counterplay. We should also consider f6. It's not that simple. Now I want to share another important principle in French endgames that is not so well discussed. Yeah, I already see the correct answer, by the way. Some of you pointed it out. The French bishop is even more problematic when the queen side is overextended. So in this position, the b4 pawn is a problem, because this pawn is a hook for white's play. That's why white can play rook a1 with the idea of a3. And after that, regardless of what black does, he will end up with a weakness on the queen side. So you see a5 was played, a3. It's not possible to play bishop a6 because it doesn't work tactically. For example, bishop a6, take, a takes b4. So knight c5, take. Here, another very important moment. Should I play bishop e2 just to prevent knight takes d3? In general, in this type of French endgame, you are never ever afraid of giving your white squared bishop for the knight of your opponent, because the opponent's knight is the only active piece. That's why Leko immediately plays king f2. And if Gurevich goes for this structure, this is practically lost, because the construction d3 plus knight d4 is tremendously strong in French defense. You see that all the important squares are controlled by this construction. Then the king will go to e3, if needed to d2. Black should think about the weak pawn on b4, but also white can start gaining space on the king side. There's a very difficult position for black. Rook c8. Remember, don't play knight takes d3 in French type of structures, because actually you exchange your only active piece, and you have no pressure against this c2 pawn. Now g4 is played by Leko. b3. In any case, white's idea is to create a passed pawn on the queen side. A very strong passed pawn. This passed pawn is meaningless because the knight on d4 is blocking it. So even if you don't play b3, I will create a passed pawn. I will bring the king to d2. I will play b3. Maybe I will exchange the rooks, and one day this move c3 will come when I get a passed pawn on the b file, and this passed pawn will win the game. Let's take a look. b3, king e3, take, bishop c2, and you see that this pawn is getting tremendously strong. Now, rook c1 was very nice move by Leku, introducing the threat of bishop takes g6, rook c8. Now, black is forced to surrender the a file, rook a1. The rooks are exchanged, and you see that this pawn starts moving. Knight b3. This is already a concrete calculation, because then the king will come to c5. Knight c5, knight b6. And here, in this position, what is the winning idea? Is it possible to win just by promoting the b file, the b pawn? Of course, it's not possible to win in this way. You should create a second weakness, and if possible, the second weakness should be far away from the queen side. In this way, black cannot combine the defense on the king side and the fight against our b5 pawn. That's why the typical idea is to bring this pawn all the way to h6. Of course, Leku is not in a rush, because he has plenty of time. His opponent has no play whatsoever, but finally he manages to bring the pawn all the way to h6. And now you see that there is a winning idea. Then this knight is going to f6, and in this way the knight will attack the h7 pawn. If he plays knight d7, then the knight will be exchanged, and our b pawn will decide the game. So this was the position in which Gurevich resigned. So when you play French defense, always remember this game, Leku Gurevich, and this is what you need to avoid at any price. This is the worst, the possible scenario in French structures. Is everything clear until now? Okay, so now we will see another example of a bad French bishop, and then we will see that this bishop is not always so bad. Let us take a look at the game Andreikin Pelletier. Once again, since white is winning, we're going to take a look from white's point of view. There is such a typical variation in French defense. This is the classical French. I'm sure that tomorrow Grandmaster Kurashevich will show a lot of interesting stuff related to this variation. So bishop c5, queen d2, bishop d4, bishop d4. Probably you know this variation. It's actually not that bad line. A bit passive. Black is playing for a draw, but according to my analysis, Black can make it. So Andreikin took on b6 and played knight b5, king e7, and here b3. Okay, it's clear that he wants to restrict the knights. He wants to put his knight on d4, the king will come to d3, to d2, bishop d3, then it's possible to win space both on the queen side and on the king side. The problem, however, is that Black has good counterplay on the king side in this structure. So when there are only two pawns on e5 and f4, I think that the advance, even the immediate g5 works well. So this is a Benko type of move, but even f takes g5 is not a winning a pawn because of knight d7 and knight e5. But even in such a structure, Black often plays bishop d7, rook g8, and when h4 is being played, h6. So there is a Benko type of compensation, but on the king side. Okay, I have analyzed g3, bishop d7, knight d4, take. And here it's very interesting that f6 is coming. Statically speaking, white is better, but he just cannot stabilize the position. So if he takes, then king d6. The idea is to take on f6 with the rook, because in this way I will be putting pressure on f4. Let me flip the board just to get a better perspective. King d2, rook f8, bishop d3, rook f6, and due to these king side weaknesses, Black has enough counterplay in this endgame. And you see that our bishop is not so bad, because it keeps the important e6 pawn. As Mihai Shuba liked to say, bad bishops protect the good pawns. That's why the French bishop very often keeps the position together. So b3 was played, f6, king d2, bishop d7. Black is playing normal moves, but here probably rook f8 would have been better with the idea of g5, just ruining white's pawn structure. When the pawn structure is clarified, however, for example, you get this position and you don't have clear objects, I think that white is already slightly better, and one can start feel the weakness of this bishop. So when you have such a passive French bishop, you should play very dynamically. And in the game, Pelletier played g5, which was, I think, a mistake. Probably better would have been bishop e8, trying to play knight d7, but okay, he played g5, and after h4, white got a considerable advantage. Rook g8, take, rook h7, the hooks were exchanged, and you see that even in this position with all the pawns on one wing, it's already very difficult for black to defend, because the d4 knight is dominating. So there is a tremendous difference in the activity of the minor pieces in this position. So yeah, rook h1. I just wanted to show one more instructive moment here. King d8 should have been played. Yeah, in this position, can you point out white's winning idea? I tried to fast forward a bit because it was not so relevant, but this position is important. Because once again, you can see the problems generated by the passive bishop. Yeah, actually the king is coming. All the black pawns are fixed on white squares. So now Andreikin starts bringing his king all the way to c5. And here c4. Finally, when all the pieces are activated, this break comes because now the threat of bishop e4 is unstoppable. Black cannot protect the b7 pawn, so white is already winning. But actually, in this variation, things are far from simple. And you should know one very typical way of handling such positions with a bad French bishop, and I want to show this game of Gurevich. If you want to master the French defense, you should take a look at all the games of Gurevich, because he's really very big specialist. Let's take a look at the game Bartosz-Sochko against Gurevich. I will fast forward a bit. He likes actually this passive variation. Why he likes it? Because he knows exactly how to hold the endgame. So knight b5, king e7, one castle, bishop d7, knight d4, and here very important move, a6. Who can explain what is the idea behind this move? If you don't know this move, a6, it will be not so easy to hold the variation, to hold the position. Yeah, so sometimes bishop b5 can be the idea, but not at all in this position. Actually, guys, in this position is completely safe for us if we manage to do two things. First of all, we try to exchange the knights. Without knights, black almost doesn't have any problems. So the idea of a6 is to prepare this maneuver. Knight c8, knight a7, knight c6. But in order to solve all the problems, it's good to close the king side as well. For example, the move g4 is usually well met by h5 in order to meet g5 with g6. If the knights are exchanged and the king side is closed, black doesn't have problems whatsoever. And you should know that our bishop is not problematic if the queen side is not overextended. If you put our b7 pawn to b4 and then exchange the knights, does it work? Will it work well for us? No, because the b4 pawn will be a hook. As you know from the game Leko Gurevich, there is this idea, king d2, rook a1, a3, and there will be different problems. Now, let's suppose something else. If we exchange the knights and the bishops, how do you evaluate the position? If I manage to exchange both knights and bishops, who is better in the rook endgame? Already black will be slightly better because he can start creating activity along the c file, and white's position will be slightly overextended. That's why white should also pay attention. Let's take a look at this game. Bishop d3, knight c8, g4, knight a7, c3, knight c6, knight f3. So he played, Gurevich played rook f8, very subtle move. What is the idea behind rook f8? This pawn is vulnerable, and that's why he wants to play f6 and f takes e4, e5. A very subtle move. That's why he played g5, h6. The idea is to take and play rook h3. That's why h4 is forced. And now we close the king side. Pay attention to this queenside play. And here, actually, black doesn't have problems whatsoever. He has no weaknesses. White has no king side activity. Black is not overextended on the queen side. So now we have some waiting moves. Gurevich wants to exchange the knights via c6. Finally, the knights have been exchanged. And you see, the knights are exchanged. We have only bishops. We have no weaknesses. The king side is closed, and the position is dead draw. You will never ever have any problems in this kind of structure without knights on the board. You see that now there is no problems whatsoever. Here they agreed to a draw without the slightest problem for black. Okay, do you have any questions about this game? Did you understand how to neutralize the initiative in such positions? Okay, I hope everything is clear, and I want to show one more game featuring the end games with major pieces in French structures. Once again, our hero is Gurevich. This time his opponent is Boris Savchenko. Now let's take a look. e4, e6, d4, d5. Gurevich usually tries to prefers the classical variation, knight f6, knight d7. So if you like this approach, I repeat, tomorrow Grandmaster Kulashevich will give you a lot of insights. This time he played bishop e3. Okay, usually he goes cd4, knight d4, bishop c5, but this is another system that he plays. Queen a5, king b1. Okay, this is not so important. Yeah, and here, in any case, I'm curious to see your suggestion. What do you think is the best move for black in this position? What is the typical reaction? Which pieces you try to exchange? Of course, we know that if in this structure we manage to exchange the knights and queens, we have no problems whatsoever. That's why, without thinking, we make this move, knight a4. Knight takes a4, bishop a4, c3, and another useful move, bishop b5. Gurevich immediately tries to exchange the bishops as well. And guys, actually, this endgame is already not equal. Why? Because I will try to explain it in the simplest possible way. This pawn is the d5 pawn is more advanced than the c3 pawn. That's why the d5 pawn restricts the scope of the white rooks, while we can display a lot of activity along the c file. That's why I can even prefer black in this position. And usually, black's queenside play in this structure is enough, and white can never completely focus on his kingside play. So you see that Gurevich played rook c5. The idea is rook dc8 and then rook c4, trying to exchange at least one pair of rooks. So he plays g4, rook c8, f5, just h6. And now black's plan is pretty straightforward. He is going to play rook c4, b5, if needed b4. There will be an open c file. In case of necessity, we can always exchange one pair of rooks. Also, rook b5 is another idea in this position, in order to start creating some queenside threats. Generally speaking, I repeat, because this is very important, in French type of structures, major piece endgames are fine for black. Of course, one might find some exceptions, but usually this is the case. So g5, immediately trying to create some threats. Take, now he played f6, rook b5, h4, and here queen takes c3. It just doesn't work. Queen b5 is not possible due to the weak first rank. Queen c2 and queen c1 mate. F takes g7. Now the g7 pawn is protecting our king. He played in this way. And it was white who got mated here. Okay, I'm not saying that this game is without mistakes. One should, of course, check it with a computer. But what it was my idea is to illustrate the logic of the fight in such structures. So, of course, at some positions, it's possible to improve white's play or black's play, but the general philosophy of the fight will remain the same. And you should know which pieces to exchange, which pieces to keep. In each case, what are the typical breaks, and so on and so forth. So this was my presentation for today. I tried to present as many ideas as possible. In the PGM file, you will find some additional ideas that I didn't have time to present. Also in the Q&A session, I can answer some questions. Guys, is everything clear from this lecture? Did you manage to understand all the typical concepts? Okay, I'm satisfied to see that you like the presentation and everything is clear. I hope that you will start playing this French defense. In general, end games are good for black, but don't forget that before the end game is the middle game. And the French middle game is not that simple. Okay, thank you very much for attending our lectures today. It was a long day. I am sure every one of you is tired. Tomorrow we have 2 more lectures by Grandmasters Kulashevich and Papaioannou, very fundamental lectures. You will learn a lot of things. So tomorrow, for tomorrow's session, you need to make a separate registration. The PGN will be available, okay, 1 week after the camp. we will try to prepare it a bit faster, while the recordings will be available Monday on the next day, or sometimes they must be can be published even at the same day when the camp finishes. So guys, thank you once again. Waiting you tomorrow. Thank you for participating. All the best, and see you tomorrow.